We are standing in my district right now. So, thank you all for being here. And I see a couple of my colleagues, Representative Tom Oliverson, Representative Sam Harless. Thank you all for coming. This past session, we had the most historic conservative legislative sessions, and I want to thank Governor Abbott for his leadership. It was under his leadership that we passed and he signed the Texas Heartbeat Act, the nation's first effective ban on abortion since Roe v. Wade. Under his leadership, we passed and signed a ban on critical race theory. We are not going to divide our kids, but instead emphasize the importance of the content of their character today. Yep. And it was under his leadership that we passed and he signed a bill to triple border security funding. So thank you, Governor Abbott, for protecting our communities and our schools. We know that you always have our back, so please welcome Governor Greg Abbott.
Small world. Howdy, Houston. Give it up for Lacey Hall. Are we in your district right now, Lacey? All right. So good luck to you. Also, we got Sam Harless and Dr. Oliverson here. Thank you all for your leadership in the Texas House of Representatives. Give it up for these members of the Texas House of Representatives. Listen, it's great to be back in Houston, Texas. Are you all ready to win? Yeah! Are you ready to turn Harris County red? Yeah! That begins today and tomorrow, every day through early voting, and then on Election Day this March the 1st, and then all the way through November the 8th. We are going to win, and we're going to win big. Let me tell you why it is that we're going to win. It's going to be so easy because we're just going to show voters the difference between what Republicans stand for versus what Democrats stand for. And it's never been easier than before today because these Democrats today, they stand for socialistic ideologies that are destructive to our great state, and we will not let these big government socialists destroy the great state of Texas. Take, for example, our economy and all the jobs that it creates. Texas today is ranked the #1 state in America as the best state for doing business. Texas is the #1 state for economic development, and I'm proud to tell you Texas is also the #1 state in America as the best state to start a small business. If you look at all the job growth that we've seen and what it's done to our economy, as we gather in Houston today, Texas now has the 9th largest economy in the entire world. But there's something more important than all that, than all those numbers, is what they mean to every family in Houston and in Texas. Because as we gather in Houston today, more Texans have a job than ever before in the history of our great state. But listen, the reason why I talk about jobs, and I tie it to this socialism by the Democrats, just look at what Beto O'Rourke has talked about doing. All right, I'm sorry. I know. She called me out on it. I did get it wrong. Let me just look at what Robert Francis O'Rourke has talked about doing. Robert Francis O'Rourke has said that he would kill the high-paying energy jobs that we have in Texas. The energy jobs, by the way, that has made Texas, America, energy independent. Let me tell you something. I am running for re-election to protect those energy jobs in the Houston area and across the great state of Texas. But, you know, when you look at some of these crazy ideologies, just look at what the Democrats are trying to do. We're trying to impose their leftist agenda on our school children, in our schools. During this past session, I saw a book that was used in elementary school, where elementary school students were being taught critical race theory in the state of Texas. You know, that's the kind of thing that would happen in California and New York, but no one thought it would happen in Texas. But it did. And you know what critical race theory does? It, in part, tries to rewrite the history of the greatest country in the history of the world, and then redesign what the future looks like. But even worse, it divides people on the basis of race and then pits those people against each other, attacking each other. It teaches the contrary of what our Constitution teaches, but also teaches the contrary of what Martin Luther King Jr. taught us. And that is, we're to be judged not by the color of our skin, but by the content of our character. That's what Texas stands for. So, during the regular session, and then another piece of legislation during a special session, we passed two bills that I signed into law where Texas banned the teaching or use of critical race theory in every subject, in every grade, in every public school in Texas. Texas now has the strongest ban on critical race theory of any state in the United States of America. And, you know, another thing that I think a lot of parents have learned, maybe it was because of the time when kids were at home because of COVID, maybe just because the issue has surfaced more recently. One thing that we've learned is the important role that parents play. Parents want to be involved in their child's education. No one cares about their child more than a parent does. And we need to understand the critical role that they play. And that's why I am advancing a parental bill of rights that restores parents as the primary decision maker in their child's education and health care. Parents matter in the great state of Texas. But you know what's most dangerous is when we see these radical leftist ideologies pose threats to the safety in our community. Take, for example, this radical policy that's completely destroyed Los Angeles and San Francisco and in Portland and Seattle and so many other communities. Is this radical ideology that somehow defunding the police will make communities safer. That is idiotic and not tolerated in Texas, because in Texas we support our law enforcement officers, period. That's why I was proud to sign a law that will defund any city that defunds law enforcement in Texas. But even more dangerous than what we're seeing because of defunding police is what we're seeing because of the open border policies imposed by the Biden administration and supported by Beto. It is reckless, it is dangerous, and completely unnecessary. Remember this, it was just over a year ago, at the end of the tenure of President Trump, we had the lowest border crossings in decades for four simple reasons. The remaining Mexico policy, the Title 42 policy, the end of catch and release, and building the border wall. Those four strategies worked to reduce border crossings. And then when Biden came in, he gutted those four strategies. He opened up the border to anybody who wanted to come across. People have come across the border from more than 150 different countries across the globe, including people coming across our border from terrorist-sponsored nations. You know, it's kind of ironic that when we deal with terror and countries that are hostile to the United States, we have Biden transfixed on what's going on between Russia and the Ukraine and the border between the two, when in reality, the President Biden needs to be focused on sending resources to his own border of the United States and Mexico. Well, Texas is stepping up and doing what the Biden administration should do. Texas is prioritizing securing the border. The legislators who are here today in the entire legislature, they provided more than $3 billion for Texas to do the federal government's job to secure the border, and that includes having 10,000 National Guard guarding the border as we gather in Houston today. Give it up for our great Texas National Guard who are working to secure the border. And they're working alongside the Texas Department of Public Safety, and they are making arrests of people coming across the border. We converted 2 prisons into jails so that we would be able to jail all the people that we are arresting down there. We are arresting people for human smuggling, for the trafficking of drugs, the trafficking of the drug fentanyl. Fentanyl, if you don't know this, you need to know it, because fentanyl is being brought into Houston, Texas. 2 milligrams of fentanyl, which is as small as 2 grains of salt, is a deadly dose. And Texas law enforcement has seized enough fentanyl to kill every man, woman, and child in Texas, California, New York, Illinois, and Florida combined. This is something that Joe Biden is doing absolutely nothing about. The only people doing anything about it are the people of the great state of Texas trying to seize this fentanyl and to shut it down. And then on top of that, yes, Texas is building our own border wall. We're using the same type of wall structure that was used by President Trump, these enormous panels that are more than 30 feet tall. So imagine at least maybe 3 times as high as the ceiling right above us here today, made out of the same metal fabrication, etc. And they add these panels hour after hour, day after day. And it got a little bit easier for us because you remember some of those materials that were laying on the ground that the Trump administration had left behind with your taxpayer dollars and the Biden administration was not using. We were able to get some of those panels, and the panels that Biden had left on the ground, we are now putting up on the wall in Texas, making the Texas border wall even longer. But listen, there's more than just your safety that's on the ballot this election. Your very freedom is on the ballot this election. You know, when we think about freedom, you think about what's in the First Amendment, for example. What the First Amendment represents is protecting your freedom of speech as well as your freedom of religion. Let's go back in time to my prior office. I want to remind people of something because there's an anniversary coming up. Well, not 30 years. So here's what happened when I was the Attorney General. At the time, there was a monument on the Texas Capitol grounds, and that monument is about 10 feet tall, higher than I could even reach, and etched onto that monument are the 10 Commandments. And there was an atheist crossing the Texas Capitol grounds, and he asked a federal court to tear down that monument. I argued that case all the way to the United States Supreme Court. That argument took place on Texas Independence Day. And we didn't know until later, until June when the decision came out, that on that day we won that argument and we won our independence to continue to display the 10 Commandments monument on the Texas Capitol grounds where it still stands today. Well, listen, Beto O'Rourke doesn't agree with the same commitment to the religious values and principles that have shaped the state of Texas, because when he was running for president, he said that he would eliminate the tax-exempt status of churches that refuse to bow down to his woke left agenda. I will not let that happen in our great state. To the contrary, I signed a law prohibiting any public official at any level from ever closing down our churches and denying you the right to go worship God Almighty. And after the First Amendment comes the Second Amendment. We all know what Beto said about the Second Amendment. He's going to come and confiscate your guns. That is outrageous that someone who wants to be a public official wants to deny you your Second Amendment rights. I have signed 20 laws protecting your Second Amendment rights in the great state of Texas. So let me just close with this. We need to understand what's going on in this election process, because there is a greater divide between the candidates who are going to be running for governor in November. One is a far-left radical socialist, and the other is a conservative who believes in the values of Texas. There's something true about everybody in this room. You all love and you know that America is the greatest country in the history of the entire world. And I think that I can tell by your reaction, there's some people in this room who may even think that you may love Texas as much, if not more, than you love the United States of America. But you need to know this also, and that is there are people running for office this election, people running for governor this election, who want to rewrite the past of the United States and redesign its future to look more like their socialistic vision. And guess what? We are going to band together, and we are not going to let these radical leftists take over our great state. We're going to beat them at the ballot box this November. And when we work together, knocking on doors, making phone calls, turning out the vote, when we do everything that's necessary to win, we are going to keep Texas the best state in the greatest country in the history of the entire world. God bless you all. God bless the great state of Texas.
All right, folks. All right, guys, we're going to do a quick photo line. We're going to start right here. We're going to exit this way.